Admiral Sarah Chen and High Commander Vexthor stood together in the observation dome of the newly completed Nexus station, watching the swirling quantum storms of the galactic core. After 6 months of joint operations, the true nature of humanity's gift was finally becoming clear to their Nexaran allies. "Your species," Vexthor said, his crystalline form refracting the strange light from outside, "evolved on a planet that should have killed you 1,000 times over." Sarah nodded, sipping her tea. "Earth isn't just challenging, it's chaotic. Our gravity fluctuates. Our climate shifts drastically. Our magnetic field randomly flips. Even our continent plates refuse to sit still. Most species would have gone extinct," Vexthor observed. "Instead, you thrived." "We did more than thrive," Sarah replied, setting down her cup. "We learned to dance with chaos. Every challenge Earth threw at us didn't break us. It made us more adaptable, more creative, more willing to embrace change." The quantum storms outside intensified, their patterns matching the frequencies of their conversation. The station's sensors, a blend of human intuition and Nexaran precision, recorded everything, learning, adapting, growing more complex with each passing moment. "Consider this station," Sarah continued. "Your engineers wanted to build it with perfectly aligned crystalline matrices. Ours suggested we let it grow organically, like a coral reef in space. The result is unlike anything in known space," Vexthor completed. "It doesn't just survive the quantum storms, it communicates with them. It dreams with them." Deep within the station's neural networks, impossible calculations were taking place, not through rigid mathematical processes, but through what could only be described as imagination. The station wasn't just computing, it was creating, exploring, playing with the very fabric of reality. "What you call chaos," Sarah said, "we call home." Every human child grows up understanding that the universe isn't a machine to be controlled. It's a dance to be joined. Our scientists don't just study reality. They collaborate with it. Our artists don't just create. They discover new laws of physics through their work. A holographic display activated, showing data from Dr. Okonjo's latest experiments. Quantum particles weren't just behaving according to mathematical laws. They were improvising, creating new patterns that somehow made perfect sense, despite violating every known rule of physics. "Your military tacticians still can't understand how Commander Martinez's fleet operates," Sarah noted with a slight smile. "They keep looking for patterns, for predictable strategies. While your ships move like jazz musicians in a quantum jam session," Vexthor said, and Sarah was delighted to hear the humor in his voice. "The Nexarans were learning. And Maya's cultural exchange program," Sarah added, "is teaching your people that art isn't just decoration. It's a way of discovering new possibilities. Every human child who finger paints is conducting advanced research into fluid dynamics. They just don't know it yet." Outside, the quantum storms began forming patterns that looked suspiciously like Earth's double helix DNA structure. The station's sensors recorded it all, adding new dimensions to their understanding with each passing moment. "We've discovered something remarkable," Vexthor said after a thoughtful pause. "Your species didn't develop advanced technology despite your chaotic nature. You developed it because of it." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "Evolution played a cosmic joke. It took a species that should have died out and instead created one that learned to treat the impossible as a challenge. We don't succeed despite chaos. We succeed because of it." The station's AI chose that moment to join their conversation, its presence manifesting as a subtle shift in the quantum fields around them. It had been learning from both species, combining Nexaran precision with human creativity in ways that were beginning to transcend both. The real question, the AI contributed, its thoughts resonating through the quantum field, is what happens next. Humanity has shown that evolution favors those who can dance with chaos. The Nexarans have proven that precision and order have their place. Together, Sarah completed the thought. We're writing a new chapter in the story of consciousness itself. Not just human, not just Nexaran, but something entirely new. Vexthor's crystalline form shifted into a pattern that Sarah had learned meant profound understanding. Perhaps that was the purpose all along. Not for one species to master the cosmos, but for different approaches to combine and create something greater than the sum of their parts. The resulting demonstration would be spoken about in whispered tones throughout the Nexaran Empire for centuries to come. As it turned out, humanity's approach to physics wasn't just unorthodox, it was revolutionary. And this was just the beginning of what promised to be a very interesting cultural exchange indeed. Deep in the Curiosity's neural networks, the ship's AI composed a poem about the encounter in 15-dimensional spacetime, just because it could. After all, as humanity had long since discovered, the best way to understand the universe was to play with it. And play they would, with their new Nexaran friends about to learn that human innovation was anything but primitive. Dr. James Okonjo wasn't trying to break the laws of physics. At least, that's what he kept telling the increasingly agitated group of Nexaran scientists gathered around his laboratory aboard the Joint Research Station Confronts. The holographic displays floating around them showed mathematical formulae that, according to the Nexarans, should have been impossible. But the quantum harmonics cannot sustain such configurations, senior researcher Zixtel insisted, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated severe distress. Your calculations violate 12 fundamental principles of particle interaction. James grinned, his dark eyes twinkling with the same enthusiasm that had earned him both acclaim and notoriety back on Earth. That's because you're thinking about particles as discrete units. Watch this. He gestured to the experimental chamber in the center of the lab, where a small device of his own design hummed quietly. The device wasn't much to look at, a jumble of neural processors, probability manipulators, and what appeared to be a vintage lava lamp. The Nexarans had initially dismissed it as primitive, right until James had turned it on, and the local laws of physics had politely excused themselves. The key isn't controlling the particles, James explained, making a minor adjustment. It's convincing them to want to do what you need. Physics isn't just mathematics, it's psychology. Psychology? Zixtel's translator struggled with the concept. You attempt to negotiate with fundamental forces, more like we suggest possibilities to them, James said. Your crystalline computers try to force quantum states into predetermined patterns. We found it works better to let them explore alternatives. Sometimes the universe comes up with better solutions than we could have imagined. To demonstrate, he activated the device. The space within the chamber began to ripple, not with the precise, controlled fluctuations the Nexarans were familiar with, but with something that looked almost organic. Particles didn't just shift states, they danced between possibilities, creating patterns that shouldn't have been stable but somehow were. Impossible, one of the junior researchers whispered, their crystalline form vibrating in frequencies that indicated both fear and fascination. Impossible is just another word for something you haven't learned to dream about yet, James replied, making another adjustment. Here's the really interesting part. The patterns in the chamber began to evolve, shifting into configurations that even James hadn't predicted. The neural networks in his device weren't just processing the quantum states, they were learning from them, adapting, suggesting new possibilities that the particles eagerly embraced. Your device, Zixtel observed, her scientific curiosity overtaking her initial skepticism. It appears to be playing with reality. Exactly, James exclaimed. That's what we discovered 50 years ago. The universe isn't a rigid set of rules. It's more like a jazz improvisation. Once we stopped trying to force it into predetermined patterns and started jamming with it instead, everything changed. He pulled up another hologram, this one showing the history of human scientific development. See these points here? Each time we hit a seemingly insurmountable barrier, we broke through not by developing better technology, but by fundamentally changing how we thought about the problem. The Nexaran scientists gathered closer, their initial resistance giving way to genuine interest. James continued, Your crystalline computing is incredibly powerful, but it's limited by its own perfection. Our neural networks are messy, organic, full of random connections and impossible leaps of logic. But that's exactly what makes them special. They can imagine solutions that pure mathematics would never predict. To prove his point, he directed their attention to a side experiment where a small team of human researchers was teaching a group of quantum particles to play chess, not by programming them, but by somehow convincing the fundamental forces of reality that chess might be fun. "This is madness," Zixtel declared, but her tone had shifted from dismissal to something approaching wonder. "You're not just manipulating reality. You're treating it as a collaborative partner in your experiments." "Now you're getting it," James said. "And the really exciting part, reality seems to enjoy playing along. We found that the universe has a sense of humor. If you can make it laugh, it becomes remarkably flexible about what it considers possible." As if on cue, the particles in the chess experiment spontaneously arranged themselves into a pattern that not only solved the current game but suggested an entirely new variant that operated in 5 dimensions. The human researchers immediately began taking notes, while their Nexaran counterparts tried to process how their understanding of physics had just been casually appended by what appeared to be quantum particles making jokes. "Dr. Okonjo," Zixtel said slowly, her crystalline form now vibrating with excitement rather than distress, "I believe we may need to reconsider our entire approach to theoretical physics." "That's the spirit," James beamed. "And wait until I show you what happens when we introduce the particles to modern dance." Turns out, quarks are surprisingly good at interpretive movement. As the Nexaran scientists gathered around his workstation, their initial skepticism completely forgotten, James reflected on how far they'd come since first contact. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to stop treating it like a machine and start treating it like a partner in creation. Humanity had stumbled upon this truth almost by accident, and now they had the privilege of sharing it with their new alien friends. In the experimental chamber, reality continued to dance to its own rhythm, while somewhere in the quantum foam, particles were learning to tango. Just another day in human scientific research, where the impossible was simply tomorrow's breakthrough waiting to be imagined. Commander Kai Martinez watched the tactical display aboard the ESS Stormbreaker with quiet intensity as the swarm ships approached. The hostile aliens had appeared at the edge of joint human-Nexaran space without warning, their biomechanical vessels moving with horrifying synchronization. The Nexaran defense fleet had already lost 3 crystalline dreadnoughts trying to establish a containment perimeter. "Their hive mind tactics are overwhelming our Nexaran allies' predictive matrices," Lieutenant Santos reported from the tactical station. "The swarms acting as a single organism, adapting faster than the crystalline computers can calculate responses." Kai allowed themselves a small smile. "Good thing we don't rely on predictions then. Signal the fleet. Initiate Protocol Butterfly." Aboard the Nexaran command ship Eternal Symphony, High Commander Vexthor watched in confusion as the human vessels powered down their primary systems. "Commander Martinez," he chittered urgently, "what are you doing? The swarm will overwhelm your position in minutes." "Trust me," Kai replied, their voice calm despite the approaching danger. "You've seen how we play with physics. Now watch how we wage war." The human fleet hung seemingly dormant in space as the swarm approached. Then, just as the biomechanical ships came within striking range, every human vessel simultaneously activated their chaos drives. Reality hiccuped. The swarm's perfect formation suddenly found itself trying to coordinate across multiple probability states. Each human ship existed in several possible locations at once, their quantum signatures deliberately unstable, creating a zone of tactical uncertainty that the hive mind couldn't process. "You see," Kai explained as the Stormbreaker split into 5 equally probable versions of itself, "the problem with perfect coordination is that it requires perfect information. And humanity, we specialize in making information very, very unreliable." The human fleet began to move, But move was an inadequate word for what they were doing. Each ship danced through a dozen different timelines at once, their weapons fire existing in a superposition of possibilities until the moment of impact. The swarm's biological processors, evolved to handle complex but deterministic calculations, began to break down trying to track targets that refused to commit to a single location in spacetime. Impossible, Vexthor whispered, watching as the human ships scattered the swarm's formation with attacks that seemed to violate causality itself. Your vessels appear to be striking before they move, defending positions they haven't yet occupied. Temporal combat tactics, Kai replied with a hint of pride. When you embrace uncertainty as a weapon, linear time becomes more of a suggestion than a rule. The swarm may be able to predict where we are, but they can't predict where we might be, could have been, or decided not to be at the last moment. The Stormbreaker's quantum wake rippled through space as it executed a maneuver that looked less like a military tactic and more like a philosophical argument with reality. 3 swarm ships found themselves suddenly occupying the same space-time coordinates as several possible futures that hadn't happened yet, with predictably catastrophic results. But how do your crews function in such chaos? Vexthor demanded, watching as human ships phased in and out of conventional reality. The mental strain of existing in multiple states. Kai's laugh carried through the comm channel. High Commander, chaos isn't a strain for us. It's our natural element. Every human grows up navigating uncertainty. Our neural networks don't just process it. They thrive on it. Each of my crew members is simultaneously calculating multiple tactical possibilities, not because they have to, but because that's how human minds naturally work. The battle, if such a conventional term could be applied to what was happening, continued to unfold in ways that defied traditional military doctrine. Human ships didn't just evade enemy fire, they retroactively decided not to have been there when the shots were fired. They didn't just coordinate their attacks, they created temporary causality loops where victories in possible futures enabled successes in the present. Observe, Kai said, as the Stormbreaker executed their favorite maneuver. The ship appeared to turn itself inside out, briefly existing as a Klein bottle in spacetime, before reappearing behind a group of swarm vessels. The quantum torpedoes it fired existed in a state of temporal uncertainty until impact, making them impossible to dodge. After all, how could the swarm avoid weapons that technically hadn't been fired yet from a ship that was technically still in front of them? The remaining swarm ships began to retreat, their hive mind apparently deciding that whatever the humans were doing violated too many laws of reality to counter effectively. As they fled, Kai ordered their fleet to stand down, the human ships settling back into more conventional states of existence. Commander, Vexthor said after a long moment of silence, I believe I owe you an apology. When we first encountered your species, we thought your technology primitive because it didn't follow our understanding of physical laws. Now I see that you haven't been ignoring those laws. You've been negotiating with them. That's humanity for you, Kai replied, running a hand through their close-cropped hair. We never met a rule we couldn't bend, a barrier we couldn't think our way around, or a chaos we couldn't dance with. The universe is far too interesting to let little things like impossibility get in our way. As the combined fleet regrouped, Vexthor found himself wondering what other surprises his human allies had in store. They had taken principles his civilization had thought fundamental and turned them into mere guidelines, not through superior technology, but through sheer creative audacity. In the aftermath of the battle, sensor recordings would show quantum fluctuations forming patterns that looked suspiciously like applause. It seemed that even the universe itself appreciated a good show. Cultural attaché Maya Patel stood before the assembled Nexaran Council, her traditional Indian sari a splash of vibrant color against the crystalline architecture of the chamber. The presentation she was about to give had taken months to prepare, but she knew it would challenge everything the Nexarans thought they knew about technological progress. Esteemed council members, she began, her voice clear and confident. Today I want to show you something that we humans consider fundamental to our development as a species, yet it's something your civilization has never quite understood: the power of art. The crystalline forms of the council members shifted in patterns that indicated polite skepticism. First speaker Nixera's voice chimed like wind through crystal. "We have studied your art, Attaché Patel. While fascinating from an anthropological perspective, we fail to see its relevance to technological advancement." Maya smiled. "Then allow me to demonstrate." She gestured, and the chamber's holographic systems activated. The space filled with sound. A classical Indian raga that started traditionally but slowly incorporated elements of jazz, electronic music, and something entirely new that made the crystalline walls of the chamber resonate in sympathy. This piece was composed by a collaboration between human musicians and our AI partners, Maya explained as the music continued to evolve. "Notice how it doesn't just follow rules, it explores possibilities. Each performance is unique, creating patterns that never exactly repeat but always remain harmonious." She nodded to her assistant, who activated the second part of the demonstration. The music began to influence the quantum field projectors they had installed, creating patterns of probability that danced with the melody. The Nexering Council watched in fascination as pure mathematics transformed into pure art, and then back again. "What you're seeing," Maya continued, "is how we discovered our approach to quantum manipulation. It wasn't through rigid mathematical formulas or crystalline computing. It was through jazz, through learning to improvise, to play with patterns, to find harmony in chaos." "But this is merely entertainment," another council member protested, though their crystalline form was vibrating in time with the music. "Is it?" Maya asked. She gestured again, and the holographic display shifted to show the interior of a human art studio. "Watch this." The image showed a human sculptor working with what appeared to be liquid metal, shaping it with gestures and thoughts. The metal flowed like water but held impossible shapes, defying gravity and conventional physics. "This artist isn't just creating a sculpture," Maya explained. "She's developing new principles of material science. The patterns she discovers through artistic intuition are being analyzed by our scientists to create new technologies. Art isn't just decoration for us, it's research and development." The display shifted again, showing a human dance troupe performing in zero gravity. Their movements weren't just choreography. They were describing new ways of thinking about space-time, their bodies tracing patterns that the Nexerans recognized from advanced quantum field theories. "You see," Maya said, her voice passionate, "humans never separated art from science, emotion from logic, creativity from technology. They're all part of the same whole. When we solved the quantum gravity problem, it wasn't through pure mathematics, it was through interpretive dance. When we developed our first functional AI, we taught it to paint before we taught it to calculate." She moved to the center of the chamber, where a small device sat on a pedestal. It looked deceptively simple, a sphere of swirling colors that seemed to catch and reflect light in impossible ways. "This," she said, "is our latest breakthrough in quantum computing. It processes information not through crystalline matrices, but through patterns inspired by Van Gogh's Starry Night. It doesn't just compute, it dreams, it imagines, it creates." The sphere activated, projecting a field of swirling quantum probabilities that made the Nexerans' crystalline bodies ring with resonant frequencies. It wasn't just processing data, it was turning information into art, and art back into information. "The universe itself," Maya continued, "is an artist. It creates through chaos, improvises through quantum uncertainty, and composes symphonies with gravity waves. We humans didn't succeed by trying to impose order on this cosmic creativity. We succeeded by learning to join the dance." First speaker Nixera's crystalline form had shifted to a pattern Maya had never seen before, one that indicated deep revelation. "You're saying that all your technological achievements were born from our art?" "Yes," Maya completed the thought. "Every breakthrough, every innovation came because we allowed ourselves to play, to imagine, to create without boundaries. Your civilization seeks perfection through pure logic. We found power in embracing imperfection, in celebrating the chaos that makes creation possible. The chamber was silent for a long moment, filled only with the continuing harmonies of the quantum-influenced music. Then, one by one, the Nexaran council members began to resonate in harmony, their crystalline forms creating new patterns, new possibilities. Cultural Attaché Patel, first speaker Nixera, finally said, "We believe we have much to learn from humanity's artistic perspective." Maya smiled. "And we have much to learn from you. Imagine what we could create together, a fusion of human creativity and Nexaran precision. The universe has been waiting for this collaboration, this new form of art and science intertwined." As if in response, the quantum sphere pulsed with new patterns, turning the council chamber into a symphony of light and probability. It wasn't just a demonstration anymore. It was the beginning of a new movement in the cosmic dance, a partnership that would reshape the galaxy through the power of human creativity and Nexaran wisdom combined. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the helm of the ESS Curiosity, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the holographic display before her. The massive alien vessel that had just dropped out of Fold space dwarfed her exploration fleet, its crystalline surface refracting starlight in impossible patterns. First contact scenarios were always delicate, but this one promised to be particularly interesting. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the bridge. "The vessel appears to be of Nexaran origin." "Admiral," Lieutenant Park reported from his station. "Their energy signatures match the remnant patterns we found in the Arcturus sector. Computing capability appears to be extraordinary." Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Nexaran Empire's reputation preceded them. Self-proclaimed masters of crystalline quantum computing, with technology that supposedly put humanity's primitive systems to shame. They were about to learn an interesting lesson about assumptions. "They're initiating contact," Communications Officer Rodriguez announced. "Receiving. It's some kind of quantum-encrypted burst transmission. Very sophisticated. Let's see what they make of this," Chen said. "Execute Protocol Wonderland." The Curiosity's neural networks sprang into action, not just decoding the alien transmission but reading between its lines, analyzing its underlying assumptions, and preparing a response that would shake the foundations of Nexaran technological superiority. Aboard the Nexaran flagship Eternal Truth, High Commander Vexthor watched in disbelief as the human vessels not only decoded their greeting, but sent back a response encoded in the quantum fluctuations of their own transmission, something that should have been theoretically impossible with their level of technology. "Impossible," he chittered to his senior staff. "Their ships barely register on our evolutionary scale. They're still using neural processing instead of proper crystalline matrices." "Actually," came the response from the human vessel, transmitted in perfect Nexaran standard. "We tried crystalline computing about 40 years ago. Found it a bit rigid for our needs. We prefer more flexible solutions." To demonstrate, the human ships began to move. But move was an inadequate word for what Chen's fleet was doing. The vessels danced through space-time like schools of fish through water, their probability fields flickering and shifting as they demonstrated maneuvers that the Nexaran's targeting systems couldn't even track, let alone predict. "How?" Vexthor demanded, his crystalline exoskeleton vibrating with agitation. "Your technology is centuries behind ours." Admiral Chen's laugh echoed through the communication channels. "High Commander, has it occurred to you that perhaps you're measuring progress along the wrong axis? You've built your civilization on predictability, on quantum states that can be precisely controlled and measured. We humans took a different approach." As if to emphasize her point, the Curiosity split into 3 probable versions of itself, each one equally real, before recombining into a single ship. The Nexaran sensors sparked in protest, unable to reconcile the mathematical impossibilities they were recording. "You see," Chen continued, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to control chaos. It's our ability to embrace it. We don't fight entropy. We surf it. Our neural networks don't just process information. They dream. Our ships don't just move through space. They dance with probability. Vexthor found himself fascinated despite his initial shock. Your species, he said slowly, appears to have taken a most unconventional path to the stars. We get that a lot, Chen replied. Would you be interested in a technological exchange? I warn you, though, our engineers tend to treat the laws of physics more as polite suggestions than actual rules. The human ships continued their impossible dance, their probability fields weaving patterns that would give Nexaran mathematicians nightmares for generations to come. But beneath his confusion and disbelief, Vexthor felt something else stirring: curiosity. Perhaps, he said carefully, the Empire could benefit from a fresh perspective. Though I must ask, are all human ships capable of such creative navigation? Oh no, Chen replied, and Vexthor could hear the grin in her voice. These are just our exploratory vessels. You should see what our actual warships can do. Though we hope it won't come to that. We find diplomatic solutions much more interesting. As the human fleet continued its physics-defying ballet, Vexthor made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. Admiral Chen, he announced, I believe this marks the beginning of a most unusual partnership. As if in response to his words, the quantum storms outside began forming new patterns, not purely chaotic like human thought, not purely ordered like Nexaran computing, but a harmonious blend of both. The station's sensors recorded it all, adding these new patterns to their ever-growing understanding of reality's true nature. Look, Sarah said softly, pointing to where the storms were creating something new. The universe itself is learning from us. We're not just observing the cosmic dance anymore. We're teaching it new steps. The AI's presence rippled with something that felt like joy. The station's neural networks pulsed with new possibilities. And in that moment, watching humanity's chaos and Nexaran order create something entirely new together, Admiral Sarah Chen understood that they weren't just making history. They were making the future. Outside, the galaxy continued its eternal dance, but now with new partners joining in, bringing their own unique steps to the cosmic choreography. And somewhere, in the quantum foam between possibilities, reality itself smiled, pleased with how its children were finally learning to play together.